أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم
पनाह मांगता हूँ अल्लाह की शैतान मरदूद से।
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
अल्लाह के नाम से जो रहमान और रहीम है।
Assalamu alaikum viewers, a very warm welcome to all of you. You're watching Hidayat TV. I'm Haider with another episode of Generation Gap. Viewers, last Monday we saw the horrific attack at the end of Boston Marathon, in which 3 innocent civilians died, and last 72 hours have seen one of the most horrific and most prolific combat between Chechenian-born Muslim and with the state authorities in Boston, Massachusetts. So today, inshallah, we will be talking about the fallout of this event, and we will speak to two very talented individuals. They both have joined us live. One, firstly, is Ali Taj from California based, and he is editor of Less Built Pakistan. Assalamu alaikum, Ali.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much for joining us. He's a writer, he's a social activist based in California. Ali Natiq on the other side is based in London. He has joined us as well. Assalamu alaikum, Ali.
Ji, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, thank you very much. Ali Natiq, can you hear us?
I can, but there's your audio is playing back here from the live session.
Okay, we'll try to resolve that. Ali Natiq is also a technology consultant by profession, active social media activist, and he writes in English and Urdu. And we'll speak to him and Ali Taj. We were also trying to get Asif Zaidi from Almaty, Kazakhstan, but there's some technical issues. We'll try to resolve those, and if he can join us, then we will talk to him as well. So let me start with you, Ali Taj. Tell us, how do you connect these events for the last week or so, being in America? How do you connect? How do you think they will affect the overall community based in US?
Ji, Sayyid Sahab, there is an enormous amount of sound playing in the background, so I can't even hear your question.
Okay. No, let me repeat
can you
it.
repeat?
Let me repeat it again. I'm saying, how do you connect being the community member based in the United States? How do you see these events unfolding in Boston for the last 72 hours?
It's very tragic, obviously, to have any loss of life, and at LUBP we have condemned this repeatedly, and everyone has condemned it, but the real connection in the United States is that there is an enormous media frenzy about this, and but unfortunately, as has happened in other cases like this, not enough attention is paid on the root cause of such unfortunate events.
Okay.
People are very focused on finding the culprits, taking them to justice, but when we look at the patterns of these tragic, unfortunate, condemnable events, people are not looking at the patterns, and people are not trying to address the root causes, and that's what's tragic.
Okay, Ali Natiq, your opening remarks.
I think I agree with Ali Taj. It's very tragic, but at the same time, I agree that the root cause is not being addressed, which is where is this ideological terrorism coming from? What is the funding for that? What is the ideology? So that's the root cause which needs to be addressed, rather than the media frenzy across the globe.
So you're talking about the root cause. So what is your version? What is your narrative? How do you take these events? I mean, are they connected to the global jihadist movement, or is something to do with the Chechen nationalism or anything from the Caucasian region?
I think at the moment we don't have enough detail, but from what it looks like, it definitely is connected to the ideological Islamist terrorism which is happening across the globe, which definitely has its roots in the Takfiri ideology and the Islamist militancy, which has been taking part around the world. So that's where the roots come from. It's difficult to say at the moment if it has a connection with the Central Asian retaliation to Russian Empire, other parts of the country. So, but definitely looks like that there is a connection to the Islamist terrorism.
Okay, Ali, let me bring you in. I mean, I mentioned the word global jihadist movement, and Ali Natik has interrupted and said global terrorism. So, what is your version? What do you think?
Well, I would like to take forward what Ali is saying, that there is not direct evidence, and that's true. I mean, the event just happened, and investigations will lead us to exactly what happened later.
Okay.
And I would like to, come back to 9/11. 9/11 happened. Al Qaeda took responsibility for it. Investigations happened later, or some investigations. In fact, it is now evident, especially pertaining to the Saudi linkages, the Saudi national linkages, were shoved under the rug, and Saudi nationals were flown out of the United States without any investigation, without any questioning. A great number of them were, and those are facts, undeniable facts.
And I believe in this case as well, there was a Saudi suspect in the very first few hours.
That's exactly what I'm coming to. There was a Saudi suspect. We've written about this on LUBP. His name is Harabi, and Harabi is a clan name in Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
And it might be an eye-opener for your viewers that there are at least 5 Al-Harabi or Al-Harbi named people on the FBI's most wanted list. And there are at least 5 Al-Harbi in Guantanamo Bay right now.
Okay.
And that being the case, this person who unfortunately suffered a minor injury in the attack in Boston was considered a person of interest. I mean, that's how the media portrayed it, but was deported from the United States the very next day, which is day before yesterday, for national security reasons. So this is the same national security reason which led the deportation of the Bin Laden family from the United States just after 9/11. So I do see a parallel there. Ali Natik's right. We don't have all the facts. We're not investigators, but we can look at what facts are out there, publicly available. And this one analogy or this one parallel is very much there.
I mean, there was another. Basically, I'm coming to this point as well. That Sunil Tripathi is another Indian guy who was focused and was crucified by the Western media in the very first few hours. And then all of a sudden, this focus has gone to these Tamerlan brothers and the Chechen connection. So obviously, they're missing the connection of that Saudi. Ali, what's your view on that?
I think I agree with Ali Abbas. He's right in saying that there's definitely a connection, and that story was instantly brushed off the media and all the attention on the Tamerlan brothers. But as I was saying, that there's very little evidence at this stage because it's only been a couple of days. But to say that there's little evidence or there's little investigation, that's holds for both the cases. It's true for these Chechen brothers, but it's true for the Saudi individuals who have been flown out of the country as well. So I think there needs to be a kind of
including Al Qaeda. So why there's no federal authorities looking into those matters? Is it in the name of national interest?
I think there has been a trend in the US around this. I mean, this is not the only case. Boston happens, 3 people die, more than 100 injured, and the next day, the U.S., who's been fighting terrorism in not just the U.S. itself, but across the world, the next day, the U.S. signs a $10 million arms deal with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. These are the two countries responsible for funding terrorism across the globe, not just the U.S., the Europe, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, you name it. Everywhere, these Arab countries have been funding terrorism. And the U.S., just after the day of Boston, signs a $10 million contract on arms deal with these countries.
I mean, same for the British government as well. I think when they go with the biggest delegates in terms of business development in UAE and Saudi, and there's no Arab Spring in Saudi Arabia. So where is all going? Ali?
There is an Arab Spring in Saudi Arabia. It happened in Bahrain when 80% of the country came out trying to depose these kings, which actually belong in the 15th century, not the 21st century. Mm-hmm. But then the big brother, which is Saudi Arabia, sent out a lot of troops to quash this small country's uprising of democracy. So, and at the same time, this quashing of the revolution was simply seen, the West turned a blind eye to it, despite the fact that the Fifth Fleet has a huge presence in Bahrain. So, selectively, there has been a policy of selectively implementing high moral standards, okay. and that's what has to change. Mm-hmm. If we go back a little further, if I may, we see that basically, I will go back all the way. So let's start with the overthrow of the last caliphate of Muslims, which was the Ottoman Caliphate. Mm-hmm. And this caliphate was overthrown by what I would like to call the first Taliban. And these first Taliban were the Saudi royal family. And they were given guns by Colonel Lawrence of the United Kingdom. And they were propped up to take down the Ottoman Empire. And to cut a long story short, these Saudi kings were the Taliban, and they have been the Taliban, and then they supported and grew their Taliban organization in different parts of the world to strengthen their own seat on power. And their seat on power depends upon the Wahhabi mullahs that kind of support or give legitimacy to their kingdom or their caliphate. And they really see themselves as the caliphs of the Muslim world. And for them, it's really important to spend billions, if not trillions of dollars to promote their ideology, which is a hateful ideology.
Okay,
so
let me interrupt you here. I mean, what I'm unable to understand is that why Saudi or anyone based in Saudi Arabia, be it the Harabi family or these known terrorists in FBI list, why would they try to destabilize the United States or the West when they have their own vested interest in those countries? There's money has been obviously laundered there, and they have huge businesses. They spend their vacations in the West. So why would they have that interest?
Why would they have the interest of helping the terrorists? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's in other words.
Okay, their interest is selectively. This is my point. Selective implementation of targets. So they would rather that these radicalized people just do the 9-to-5 job, which means that they do terrorism where appropriate. Where appropriate would be, I mean, I should not actually use, one person's terrorist, another person's freedom fighter.
I will come to that as well, because that's a very important question. Please go ahead.
What I'm saying is that, once you spread an ideology of hate, mm-hmm. once you have mosques replaced, the heads of which have been replaced by hateful mullahs who are propagating the same ideology that, anybody who says Merry Christmas should be killed, then you're going to have some undesirable results from time to time as well. If you breed a Taliban, which you need to fight in Syria, which you need to fight the Russians in Afghanistan, at some point they will produce an undesirable result as well. And 9/11 is one of those undesirable results. So is the Boston blast. There may not be a direct involvement of a strategic plan to do this, but it may be something that these terrorists, once you breed the snakes, they to protect you. Yes, okay, they will bite your enemy most of the time, but sometimes they'll bite you too. And that's the kind of the
So
theory.
it's the same narrative which Senator Charlie Wilson in 1980s had about the Afghanistan war, when they were giving them the Stinger missiles and all the equipments to fight the Russian invasion in Afghanistan. Okay, Ali, let me bring you in. This nationalism and also this freedom fighter versus jihadi moment. How do you look at this region? Because it's been ignored by the West. I'm referring to the states of Russia, 21 republics. Obviously, Dagestan and Chechnya is one of those. So they've been battling with those terrorists or freedom fighters or jihadis for the last 20 years. And a journey has been embarked upon by the United States after 9/11. Now, they've been helping those Chechen rebels, freedom fighters, and all of a sudden now the narrative will change, I assume. So what's your stance on that?
I think let's be very clear on that there is a very strong Islamist militancy in Central Asia, which includes all the states, especially Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Dagestan, and Chechnya as well. And this is not recent. It's been more than 2 and 3 decades that Islamist militancy has been establishing there. They have been fighting not just in these countries, but in other countries. Like there have been cases reported when Chechens or Uzbeks have been found fighting in Afghanistan, in Fatah, elsewhere in Pakistan, even in Syria and more places. I mean, if you read the data of drone attacks, a lot of Chechens and Uzbeks have been killed in them. So if you look at the history of the region, I mean, more than 20% of the Chechen's population, the country fled and took refuge in other countries, and nearly 200,000 have been killed in the last 2 decades. So we have to agree that these people have been victims of a long war, which has been ignored. They have been persecuted by the Russians. The West and the world at large has ignored the region, and the Islamists have took advantage of the situation. And that's how they have established a very strong Islamist network, and they are able to recruit people. They are able to brainwash people. Russia in its own has not just persecuted the people, they have installed their own dictator, putting the legitimate leadership of Chechens and the prime minister to exile. Now what happens is that Putin continues to play the Chechen Islamist terrorist card to show himself as very tough against terrorists and show to the world that his grip on power needs to be strengthened because he's fighting the terrorists. But what we need to take care of here is, and it is vital, that most Chechens, they identify themselves as a European nation. They are the people who believe in separation of religion and state. The Islamists there have taken advantage, have created a minority there who are using this region and the deprived people for their own aims. So, but the people themselves, they believe and understand in secularism, and the Islamist the terrorism in the region is not rooted in that region. So we have to be careful here and not allow Russia or Putin to take advantage of the situation, or the Islamist militants to do that as well.
My question, because if you see at the geographical area of this Chechnya, this is a beautiful region, and it's been a hotbed between Russian communism and the Islamic militancy now. So, but West has been hiding away it from the main media. So why they don't go in there and help those freedom fighters and term them terrorists, or are they too busy with the Middle East meddling affairs in the Middle East?
Yeah,
Ali Taj?
Well, Ali wants to say something. Let Ali finish first.
I was just saying that all nations have their own national interest, and the national interest of the US at the moment is to make their presence felt in the Middle East. And as Ali was saying, that selective morality or selective justice in the Middle East. That's what they are doing at the moment. They have an interest in Syria. That's why they are funding and supporting the Free Syrian Army and terrorists there. They don't have an interest in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, so that region can wait for a while. The oppressors and persecuted, the kings who persecute, they can be ruler there, but in Syria they can't. So it's just national interest which matters, and that's how the European states and the US is operating at the moment. There's no national interest or something which suits them to go and act in Central Asian region at the moment.
Okay.
The other thing I would like to add is that the insurgency in Chechnya, the Chechnyan freedom movement started as a secular, progressive, pluralistic movement, and it has been hijacked by people like Khattab, who is actually a Saudi-born mujahid, was a mujahideen with Osama bin Laden, and then became the commander of their Taliban over there, and has been fighting the Russians and others with him that are Saudis and Qataris and mercenaries, even from Pakistan, like Ali said, have gone there, who are the Wahhabis, radicalized Deobandis who were pretty peaceful people, have been Wahhabized and radicalized in this global, or starting with the Afghan jihad, and they've gone everywhere. And this selective morality actually goes a stage further. Brzezinski has actively advocated using these people to destabilize the enemies or the competitors of the United States. So they have been used to fight, obviously, Russia, and then taken a step further to implant them in Chechnya. So saying that they were used against the Soviets, and now they're just totally not being used against the Russians. The Russians are also playing the terrorist card. So the thing is that we have to rise above this playing of cards and actually cut off the head of the snake. So we cannot have a world peace, a world order that we can, where we don't have innocent people being killed every day. We have, we had this blast in Boston, which hits close to home over here, but there's terrorist acts going on all over the world. And if you look at 95% of these terrorist acts, you will find the Wahhabi or the Wahhabis radical fingerprints in one shape, form, or another. So you have to kind of put a stop to this, rise above this selective morality or these games which have been played in the past. It simply cannot go on and the world be a safe place anymore.
You were talking about the cutting off the head of the snake, but I remember in Washington Times and an op-ed here, the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, he right to cut off the snake in the region, and he was referring it to Iran. So if you talk from their perspective, they are talking that when you having a Shia-led government in Iraq, and then a Syrian Shia Alawi government based in Syria, and then Iranian government, so this is a very dangerous triangle for them to rule in the region, and they're referring them as snakes. So how would you defend your view on that?
Well, they can say what they want. I mean, if they consider Iran a snake, that's their thing. They can defend that. I just go by the facts, and the facts are that in all these terrorist acts that have happened all over the world, including the United States, including 7/7, 9/11, you don't see any hand except the Wahhabi Salafists. You don't see, the data completely shows you.
And especially, I would like to add the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi element in Pakistan as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Deobandis in Pakistan, if I go back to my earlier point, when the Saudis destroyed the last caliphate of the Muslims, they were not really well liked by the Islamic world. So they came to the ulama Deoband in India, and they made a pact with the ulama Deoband, saying that we are just servants or custodians of the holy places. We are not the caliphs, and we will run these holy places with the consensus of all Muslims. And this is a written pact they made, which has been published on LUBP. So then they reneged from that pact, and they used the Wahhabi mullahs to legitimize their caliphate or their kingdom. And it wasn't until after the death of King Faisal rather, that they started using the title, which is the Khadime Haramain Sharifain, or the guardian of the holy mosque. They wouldn't dare use it. So for all these years, for 30 or 40 years prior to the death of King Faisal, they just propagated by buying up mullahs of various mosques around the world, especially Deobandi mullahs. It's very easy to change a mosque from being a normal mosque to a radical mosque. You simply buy the mullah, simply by the imam of the mosque, and that's what they have the money to do. And when the oil money became plentiful and they were able to buy off these mullahs after Faisal, then they took the title of the guardian of the holy places. Before that, they were commonly considered usurpers, commonly considered people who have vandalized and taken over Mecca and Medina, the holy places of the Muslims, from the legitimate caliphate of the Muslims, which was the Ottomans. I am not saying the Ottomans were great or anything, but this is how they were viewed. And they changed that view by gradually spending hundreds of billions of dollars and buying up mullahs around the world and propagating their hateful Wahhabi ideology. So this has been going on with no relationship to Iran for decades. It is just to legitimize and protect their own leadership. And because they spread this hate all over the world, the unintended consequence is what happened in Boston. So they'd rather that it stayed focused on their enemies, but it doesn't always. If you breed a lot of snakes, some will bite you too.
Okay, coming back to Boston, I want to bring in Ali Natik here. Tamerlan Tsarnaev and Joker Tsarnaev, two brothers, one is 19, one is 25, both raised at least in the United States, and according to some of their friends, they were Americans because they used to smoke weed. And now we have this version of Islamic militarism attached with those two. So where does the real Islam stand?
I think we have to look at the trend of this ideological terrorism, which there are different dimensions to this, and recently there has been a change into it. The common perception goes like that these Islamist terrorists are uneducated, unprivileged, coming from rural background, that's how they're brainwashed. But recently we have seen several cases, and this is what I call pop Islamists, because there has been a trend where you find urban, educated, privileged young people turning into terrorists, buying into the Salafi Wahhabi ideology propagated by Saudi Arabia, especially in the West, where they have taken over all the mosques. And I live in the United Kingdom, and I know almost all the mosques here are pretty much controlled by the Saudi Arabia. They even control when do the people and community celebrate their Eid. So if you look at some of the statements which these brothers made, you will look how bigoted the thought process of these guys have gone in a host country which give them protection when they fled from another country, and how they didn't want to integrate in the country. They were the thought process, how they were brainwashed. I mean, for some of the statements, I'll read these for you. One of them says that if he wins enough fights in boxing there, he would he might play for the U.S. Olympic team and be naturalized American. And he also says that he would rather play for the United States than Russia. He says that I don't have a single American friend. Then he goes on to say that I have a half Italian, half Portuguese girlfriend. And then adds on to go and listens to this radical hate speech Lebanese Saudi speaker. So you see this bigoted thought process. So we don't really know if these brothers were directly linked to any militant organization, but they don't really have to, because this thought process, they had actually gone into the society, the communities, so the mosques and madrasas. So the most recent Muslim terrorist plots, they were carried out by lone wolves, individuals, or small organizations. They get their Islamic indoctrination or explosives looking at the videos online through the propaganda and mosques and madrasas. So it may turn out at the end that these brothers attended either terrorist camp at some point, but it's not necessary. It might be that they more likely never did actually. So the terrorist training camps, we know that they exist, but on the internet, you have so much material, and there's so many videos out there by using which, especially the social media.
The younger one, Jogar, has the Syrian civil war images on his Facebook profile as well.
Yeah.
Well, Ali Nadik very well captured this. I'd just like to jump in that he's referring to this Fayaz Muhammad guy, who's the Lebanese most dangerous imam, considered most dangerous imam in Australia, and who's been chased by several intelligence organizations. But so these, he is one example, but there is so many, and all of these imams are Saudi Wahhabi Salafi funded. All of at one point or another, they indoctrinate these imams. I can tell you that there's a King Fahad Mosque in every city, or King Faisal Mosque in every city in the United States, and I think the same in Europe, in England. And what these mosques have is 19-year-old imams who come from the Yazid Institute in Riyadh. The Yazid Institute, what can they teach a 19-year-old to come here and preach? Only that the King of Saudi Arabia is great, and anybody that says Merry Christmas, kill him. Just very basic things like that. So while these people may have been smoking weed, or may have been doing what young people in the United States of their age are doing, one fine day they became influenced by one of these imams and just automatically spawned into snakes. So this is what I'm talking about when I say chopping the head of the snake. Is we have to stop the preaching.
But who will chop this head off? That's my question. Because if you look at the security apparatus, I mean, that is inclined towards Saudi Arabia as well. There's, I mean, 10,000 policemen were fighting one guy who made a pressure cooker bomb.
This is what's ridiculous. And then we've spent trillions of dollars fighting wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, I'm not saying that the people in Afghanistan and Iraq which we were fighting were good people, and obviously getting rid of some bad people is a good result too. But the fact remains, this is not the right way. Spending 10,000 people's time, money, and effort to find this one guy who found a pressure cooker somewhere. What you have to stop is the people who are telling them to do these pressure cookers, and that's what's not been done. That's what I said in the very beginning, that not enough has been done to stop this terrorism at its source, which is the Saudi Wahhabi Salafist ideology, who have now corrupted the Deobandis in Pakistan, who used to be like half Wahhabi, have now become notoriously Wahhabi.
But Ali, again, my question is that who will? Because if you look at the security apparatus, America is involved. They are doing the deals, arm deals. Britain is involved. They're doing the arm deals with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has their own agenda. So who
arms deals with whoever? That's I don't think that's going to be the issue. I think the people of the United States, the people of Europe, have to be educated about what's really going on here. We can't just keep chasing this elusive thing and drive our economies into bankruptcy by waging these wars. We have to be smart about this, and we all have to understand what's really going on here, and we have to stop the breeding of these serpents at its source. And unless we do that, we will be driving ourselves into bankruptcy, losing people.
Ali Natik, let me bring in Ali Natik. I mean, he's suggesting we need to educate people, and we need to. I mean, I was in one of my shows, I was speaking to Bina Server from United States, and she mentioned very rightfully that we have to reclaim our space. Now, Saudis won't let it happen. So, and in America, I was reading this in the morning today that 96% of Americans, they did not have any sort of stereotyping towards Chechnya. So they did not know, and we all are aware that even the ambassador in the United States of Czech Republic, he issued a formal statement condemning and also telling people that Czech Republic and Chechnya are two different states. So how we will educate these people?
I think firstly we have to make a distinction here. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, or the Arab states, they have an ideological war with the rest of the world. The United States, the Europe, they do not have an ideological war. The terrorism which comes from the Salafi Deobandi thought process funded by Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, that's an ideological terrorism. They have a thought process using which they prepare people and then kill other people. The United States or Europe or these countries who are supporting them, they do this considering this is our national interest by supporting them. What we have to do using our non-violent peaceful struggle by educating and creating awareness, and at the end goal we have to do is we have to convince the US that this is not the national interest either for the US, the EU, or the whole wide world. The national interest lies in making ties with peaceful people, peaceful nations, not such states who have an ideological battle, ideological war with anyone in the world. That's what we have to do as bloggers, as journalists, as ordinary citizens through our peaceful, non-violent struggle.
Educating the public and bringing this narrative of ourselves that we represent at least the true version of Islam. What do you think that what would be helpful to those people who, when you write something, they label you as Iranian agents, or that you do have an agenda as well? How would you tackle, or how would you reply to those critics?
I'm a critic of Iran as well, and I think so is Ali. But we shouldn't make a false binary between Iran and Saudi Arabia. There is definitely problems in Iran, but we have never found in these past, let's say, couple of decades that any Iranian-sponsored group has carried out bomb blasts like this, or has been anyway involved in 9/11 or anything like that. They have problems, and they are repressive in their ways, and we'd like to appeal to them that they should reform. But that has absolutely no binary equivalence with what Saudi Arabia is doing. What Saudi Arabia is doing is just far beyond anything else, and it's they're spending hundreds of billions of dollars, as Ali rightfully said, to propagate their hateful Wahhabi selfist ideology, which has now successfully corrupted the Deobandis, who were used to be, if you look at that agreement which the king of Saudi Arabia, the old king Saud, did with the Ulama Deoband, they were on opposite side of a negotiating table. Now they are on the same side.
On the same side, yes, indeed.
So that has radically changed in the past 60 or 70 years. And what's changed it is the oil money. So they have an ideological axe to grind to protect their own kingdoms. They have to convert everybody into a Wahhabi lover or a Wahhabi sympathizer, and that's what they're doing. They're doing this to protect their own kingdoms. They have an ideological axe to grind. In 19, I believe it was 64. The second Saudi king was replaced by Faisal, the third Saudi king, and this was done through the Council of Wahhabi Ulama. So what gives the Saudi regime their legitimacy or their reason to be able to rule as the wali of, or the guardians of the holy places, is these Wahhabi ulama. So the reason the son of the old king was taken down was because he was a drunk. Everybody knows that. He was so drunk that he could not function properly.
Okay,
And
okay.
so- but the mo-
Let me interrupt you, Ali. We're finishing with time. I mean, Ali Natik. Last question. Your thoughts. Mechanical, dehydrated, and a rather stiffer version of Islam you have to combat. So, what is your message to the viewers? I mean, and I want to make it clear to our viewers as well, while taking this opportunity, that we are not against the ideological battle or ideology of any Salafi or Wahhabis, but we also focus that they should come forward and talk to us and talk to people with their intellect rather than going and killing people. So tell me, Ali Natik, your last thoughts on that, please.
Right, I'll take a couple of minutes. First, like to go back to my point saying that there are no boundaries when it comes to the propagation of this ideology. The argument that the Islamist terrorism is response to the American presence in Muslim countries or it's caused by poverty, lack of education or persecution, this is absolute nonsense. I can quote countless examples of Islamist terrorists who are highly educated, who are professionals, doctors, engineers, PhDs, affluent, rich backgrounds, upper class social status. So this is a pure ideological war. The cause of Islamist terrorism is an ideology. There are states who are funding it. And we have young, middle-aged, old men, children, men, women, rich, professional, all kind of people doing it. In terms of the Muslim reaction and what Muslims should do, I think, like we have seen the Muslim leaders in Boston condemn the attack and Friday prayer were cancelled. I think this is a reactionary response. The Muslim leaders and communities need to do preemptive work. The Islamist militancy is a reality. We have to accept it. It has a history. And the responses like the Muslims are not terrorists, or we are being persecuted. This is not an answer. Muslim communities have to look deep into the problem and find out what are the ideological root causes, where they lie, who is financially funding them, where does the operational logistics come from. Yes, most Muslims do not want bloodshed, but most of them have unfortunately held on to a process of radicalization through schools, through preaching, through mosques, through centers of religious learning, and there are states funding it, and we are open to it. We are not reacting as we should. So,
okay. Thank you very much. Ali, your last thought, 30 seconds.
Well, I think we need to focus, like Ali said, focus on the root causes and coming back to the beginning. And we need to be open to the idea that this is a consistent pattern. You know, the Muslims that say, oh, don't use the word Muslim, they're actually digging their own grave. In the end, everybody will use the word Muslim because it's real. This is within this is within our fold. These states like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, they are funding it. They're funding in places like Syria, where the Free Syrian Army has just announced that they're actually Al Qaeda. So these people, they keep changing names, but the militancy, the ideological basis of it is very clear.
Okay, thank you very much both for joining us, and with this message that we have the enemy with last thoughts from Ali and Ale, that we have the enemy within ourselves. So we have to fight those elements within our own society as well as own thought process, and we must come up with a solution which gives a peaceful message to the whole humanity, and we should serve the humanity. With this thought, as always, and prayers, that गम हमको ना दे सिवाय गम शब्बीर शब्बीर का गम बांट रहा है तो इधर दे अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मदिन व आले मुहम्मद.